After being paralyzed in Vietnam, a Marine gradually turns into an anti-war activist. Listen as we discuss our different Mario Kart philosophies, the worst month to get sick, and the power of denial. Then we find out if Born on the 4th of July stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and joining me, as always, is Alan Noah, the director of this podcast, and putting this all together for you. We've got a good episode for you today. How are you, Al?
I am doing very well. Thank you, James. This episode is coming out on the 4th of July. And so, yeah, I just felt like if we have an episode coming out on the 4th of July, we should talk about Born on the 4th of July. It just seemed to make perfect sense.
Oh, yeah. What way to celebrate 249 years of the nation that brought us independence and the moon landing. And, well, I mean, it's a very, very depressing film that isn't very happy with this country in some ways, but we are going to talk about it nevertheless.
Yes. But before we get into the movie, I wanted to talk to you about the Nintendo Switch 2. Because I got it, I picked it up right away. I know you don't have one. So I thought I would just give you and our listeners a kind of spoiler-free mini review now that I've had some time to play around with this system. And if I was doing this kind of review for the Switch 1, or even kind of to a lesser extent the Wii U or the Wii, there would have to be some kind of big picture explanation of what it's like gaming in this new way that Nintendo has invented for this console. With Switch, it's a handheld and a home console at the same time. Whoa, that's kind of mind-blowing. The thing with the Switch 2 is that there's no brand new big picture thing to explain. If you've played the Switch, you know how the Switch 2 plays. There's no groundbreaking thing here.
I think it made sense for Nintendo to not do a radical, oh, this system is going to be all voice activated or something radically different from the Switch because they had such a good winner there. It was 2015, 2016 hardware in there. So I think it mostly needed an update. So from what you're saying, that's all it is. But I think that might be a smart thing that Nintendo's done.
Yeah, I'm not saying it as a bad thing. Like, I have seen that criticism online of it's basically just a Switch but bigger. And yeah, that is a very accurate way to describe it. And on the system, I've mostly been playing Mario Kart World. That is the flagship launch game. Sort of the hook, quote unquote, for the game is the open world feature. I really haven't done too much open world driving. I want to spend a little bit more time doing that. But I think that regardless of that, the game is really fun because the courses are really fun. And there is something, I think, kind of unique about a Mario Kart game where it's just so much fun the first time you play it through. The first time you play through these new courses and you don't know what to expect and you're just taking it all in and enjoying the design and the characters and the world that they've created. And, then there's replayability in there because you want to keep doing the courses on the harder cups and get better and unlock more things. But just that joy of playing through these courses for the first time, I'm having so much fun with that.
That's funny you say that. I'm the exact opposite when it comes to Mario Kart. I actually really prefer courses that I really know very well.
Oh.
I think I popped in like Super Mario Kart Wii or some game I hadn't played in years, and it's not one of the retro tracks that are on the later systems. And I didn't remember this one. I was like, oh yeah, and I wasn't as good as it at it. But when I can get to one of those tracks I really know very well, then I know all the tricks and I know, oh, here's a ramp I can use a mushroom on to get a shortcut on this N64 track.
So you don't have a Switch 2 yet. Are you looking to get one? Are you going to just come on over and play? I mean, you're more than welcome to.
The thing about being a so-called patient gamer is you want to wait until things inevitably go down in price. That doesn't really happen with Nintendo items.
This one could go up before it goes down.
I mean, maybe it might go on sale for like, there might be a great sale on Black Friday for $50 off or something, but I think I'm going to wait for at least a killer game because there's nothing on it that makes me say, oh, I really want to spend $500 on it right now. I don't have children to use it with, so I'm perfectly content with all the games I have right now. It's not even going to be a great Zelda game or a great Metroid game that I'm looking forward to on the Switch. It's going to be probably a great social game that, wow, everyone's playing this game, and you really don't want to miss out on the hype of when everyone's online of this. Maybe that can convince me, but otherwise, I'm probably going to wait a little bit until I have a good opportunity.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, come on over. You can play some Mario Kart with me. But let's get into Born on the 4th of July. I had never seen this movie before. I didn't really know a ton about it other than it starred Tom Cruise and was a anti-Vietnam War movie directed by Oliver Stone. Well, why don't you tell our listeners what it's all about for anyone who hasn't seen it?
All right. Born on the 4th of July is a movie about Ron Kovic, a boy from Massapequa, Long Island, who was born on the 4th of July, as the title says. Ron loves baseball and playing soldier with his friends, and he decides not to go to college, but rather to enlist in the Marines so he can fight in the Vietnam War. There, Ron participates in a raid that leaves many innocent villagers dead. He also accidentally shoots and kills a member of his own platoon. During another battle, Ron is shot and is paralyzed from the chest down. After suffering in an underfunded veterans hospital, Ron returns home to Long Island, but he's depressed and returns to alcohol, which eventually leads him to Mexico. There he drinks and hangs out with prostitutes and other veterans. Ron returns to the U.S. and apologizes to the family of the soldier he killed. He then becomes a vocal anti-war activist, eventually speaking at the 1976 Democratic National Convention.
Right. Okay, so when this movie came out, how did it do at the box office?
This film did very well. I was actually surprised. I had expected a modest box office take for this. It had a limited release on December 22nd, 1989 for Oscar purposes.
Oh.
And it had a lot of Oscars, but it released wide on May 5th, 1990. It had anywhere between a 15 and $18 million budget, and it opened at number one with $11 million and was number one at the box office for 3 weeks in a row in May.
Wow.
But it ultimately left the theaters with $90 million box office, $161 million worldwide, and pretty much capping the Oliver Stone Vietnam War trilogy.
No, this movie comes out after Platoon, but before Heaven and Earth. Heaven and Earth was the third in his trilogy.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. So this is the second.
Right.
Very different perspectives from Oliver Stone of Vietnam.
Right, and Oliver Stone himself was a Vietnam veteran, as was Ron Kovic, who is a real guy. He wrote an autobiography about his experience in Vietnam and his whole life, and Oliver Stone adapted it for this movie. And Oliver Stone and Ron Kovic worked together on the screenplay, so they were able to infuse their own experiences into this movie. And there is anti-Vietnam War sentiment in this movie. You can agree with that or disagree with that, but because this movie was written and directed by two Vietnam veterans, I think you can't just discount their perspective. Even if you radically disagree with it and you think America should have been in Vietnam, which I don't think is a particularly popular opinion, at least now. I'm not really sure about back in 1989. I'm guessing that wasn't the general consensus then. Still, like the fact that this movie was made by two veterans, you feel that. I mean, I felt that watching the movie. Like, this is a movie told by people who understand this material deeply.
Yes, and Oliver Stone knew that war, even these quote unquote great wars like World War II, that everyone kind of cheers on and they say things like, "My dad got to go to World War II, and now this is our turn." Even in the beginning, those soldiers in the Fourth of July parade, they're cringing at every single firework, and one of
Yeah.
them is actually Ron Kovic in that parade.
Right.
And I think that's important that, these World War I and II veterans, they are not like just reveling in their heroism. They're shell shocked and, what we later call PTSD. These are very, very affected men from these wars.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a callback to that later on when Ron Kovic, as Tom Cruise, not the real guy, is in the parade for him when he's come back from Vietnam and he's flinching at the fireworks. Because, yeah, that makes sense. Those loud bangs are going to be terrifying for someone who's been in war. But I want to take a little time and talk about the beginning of the movie with Ron in Massapequa, where he's watching that parade and he's playing baseball and he's playing guns with his friends in the park. Pew, 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 I got you. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. He has his first kiss. He gets his Yankee hat. And while I was watching the movie, I felt like, okay, Oliver Stone, you are really laying it on thick with all of the Americana, with all of the Norman Rockwell vibes. It felt like he was trying to pack in every piece of Americana into 30 minutes of film. I do think, though, that when I finished watching the movie, it bothered me less, because even though the movie does spend a long time with Ron's childhood, and even though maybe at first it does kind of seem a little overly nostalgic and possibly bordering on cheesy, I think that it does play an important part in making Ron who he is. And I think that if you look at this movie as a character study of Ron Kovic, all of this stuff is very important. And it does play a role in the man that he becomes later. So my perspective on the beginning of the movie changed after I was finished with the movie.
He does spend a long time, Oliver Stone, on cementing the fact that this is a man that is a very athletic man who uses his legs.
To me, it was less about his strong legs and more about him losing in that wrestling match, because there's just so much of an emphasis on you have to win. You cannot lose. And Ron works really, really hard as a kid. He's training really hard for that wrestling match, and he loses. And so that loss, that kind of humiliation in front of his schoolmates, his family, that really affects him. Then he asks out Donna, who clearly likes him, but she says no because she's clearly been waiting for him to ask her out forever, and he's just kind of shy and doesn't know how to act. So he is humiliated. He's humiliated at the wrestling match. He's humiliated by Donna not going out with him. And I'm not saying that that it's Donna's fault or anything like that, but that leads him to be even more susceptible to the propaganda when the Marines show up at his school and they say, come join the Marines, be the best, be the strongest. This is how you can be somebody. Before that, Ron doesn't feel like he's somebody. So
exactly.
So he is really taken by that propaganda. Also, the fact that his dad was in World War II and he has this vision from these parades of that's what you do. You go and you fight in the war and you come back and you're a hero. So all of those things lead him on the path that he's on. When we get to Vietnam, very, very quickly in the movie, we see, for lack of a better term, the shit. It's not right away for Ron, because he says to the soldier that he ultimately kills, he says, this is my second tour and I haven't seen a boy from Georgia get hurt yet, which is pretty clear foreshadowing. But Ron, the character, has been in Vietnam for some time. So, presumably things have been going at least okay, not horrible tragedy. But the movie just shows us, the audience, the shit right away. I thought that was a little jarring. And I felt like after having spent so much time in Massapequa, it might have helped the movie to have spent a little bit more time in Vietnam, seeing, maybe good is too strong of a word, but, before going to the bad, seeing some of the camaraderie that Ron has with his soldiers, how he feels about being in this war before the shit. But we get to the shit pretty fucking fast.
Yeah, we do. There's one really interesting decision that Oliver Stone makes, and that is the setting of this battle that ultimately injures Ron. It was kind of a desert, and I found that to be one of those things that I feel like they would do differently in a film. And someone would say, that we were actually in a desert, and some producer would go, no, the audience won't understand, so just put it in the trees. Like, audience thinks Vietnam, it's got to be jungle.
Well, there is a real world reason for that. Oliver Stone was not able to film in Vietnam because the relationship between America and the country Vietnam was still, it was a little frosty. So he had to film in the Philippines.
Yeah, but he filmed Platoon in the Philippines as well. And Platoon, I don't know if you've seen Platoon,
No.
that is more of your classic it's in the green, it's in the jungle and all that stuff.
And yeah, so there are two scenes of the shit. The first is when Ron and his troop attack a peaceful village, and you feel the foreboding sense of what's going to happen when his commanding officer is like, look over there, there's rifles, you see the rifles? Ron's like, no, you see the rifles, right? Do you see the rifles? And Ron again is like, he's like, you see the rifles, don't you? And then Ron says, yeah, sure. There are no rifles. They just shoot up this village. They're innocent civilians. They slaughter this family. There's a screaming baby as, I guess, the only survivor. And then as they're fleeing, they are eventually attacked. And in the melee, Kovic shoots one of his fellow soldiers. He tries to confess what he's done to his sergeant, and the guy's like, no, I don't think you did. It's like, no, I shot him. And the guy says, no, you didn't. Get out of here. I can't listen to this. So this sets up this guy's journey where he feels like he has to come clean about what he's done. And then in the very next battle scene, we see Ron get shot, wounded, and then he's back in the States and he's paralyzed. He's in this veterans hospital, which is just a fucking nightmare. Like the way that this hospital is run, clearly there's no budget. There's no budget for a full, robust staff of doctors and nurses and orderlies, for good medical equipment. I mean, I don't have any personal experience here, but from everything I've heard and read, this unfortunately, tragically, does stand the test of time, that the care that veterans get now in the 21st century is abysmal. It's god awful. And for all of the talk that politicians do about how much we love our veterans and how we're going to treat our veterans right, we don't. We don't put any money into these things. We pull money from them, and people who are in desperate need of good medical care get shit.
Right. I mean, this episode is released on July 4th, and there's this medical joke that says, "Don't get sick in July," because the medical year goes from July to June. So if you go to an academic hospital, they're going to be brand new doctors there, or even the senior resident. He was a junior resident like 4 days ago.
Oh,
So that's the joke. Don't get sick in July. The VA hospitals are, I mean, they're known as kind of, a lot of times people go there to learn because how do I say it the right way? I mean, it's not known as the best care, and not because the doctors and nurses and staff are not good doctors. They're just completely underfunded. They actually do show that. They do show some workers that are either they don't care at all, or that they're so underpaid that they're with like 8 billion patients that they're just completely going crazy. But they show one scene where there's this doctor that you could see there's still a tiny spark of there's a good person in here, because there's this one pump. I guess it's some kind of, I don't know, something for his catheter. I don't know what it is, but it's something that's definitely has this brown stuff coming out that I don't think should be there.
right.
And it's something along the lines of, if you don't get this pump working, they're going to have to amputate his leg. And the doc is like, yeah, I guess that's what's gonna happen. Vietnam War cuts of Vietnam War cuts. And then the Ron's like, please. And the guy's like, all right, let me see if I can rig something up. And that was another really important scene that I think it was important for Stone to touch upon because we don't talk about this a lot. We put unlimited money into active soldiers, but veterans, you get a parade, and that's it.
Right.
Again, there are good people at the VA, and if it wasn't for the VA, some of these people would have nothing. But
Sure.
there's a lot more that really needs to be done for these men and women.
You're right.
And oh boy, yeah, that's a horrible scene. I think the two nightmare scenes in this film are both in the medical tent and also that scene where he's hanging by his back in that stretcher, and he's upside down in it.
Yeah.
He's like, "Please treat me like a human being."
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those real Tom Cruise scenes, but it was really, really well done. I mean, Cruise's acting in this film, I thought he did an excellent job in this film. I thought he was very good.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I feel like I said this back in our Magnolia episode, but especially having just watched three Mission Impossible movies back to back, seeing what Tom Cruise can do in a movie like this, yeah, I just wish he did more roles like this where he just acts. Because, after he leaves the Veterans Hospital, he comes back to Long Island and he turns to alcohol, which, again, unfortunately, is a thing that stands the test of time for a lot of veterans. That's a way that they cope because, they're not getting good care. They're not getting mental health care that they need. And so they drink. It's awful. It's tragic. And he's yelling, he's screaming at his parents. His mom really can't handle it. His dad's taking care of him, but he ultimately decides to go to Mexico. And I wasn't totally clear about how he kind of found all the other veterans in Mexico, because the way they kind of describe it in the movie is go to Mexico and then he just shows up at a resort and there's a bunch of other veterans. I think there's probably just more behind the scenes of this is where you should go in Mexico if you are a veteran. This is where people congregate, I assume, unless there was just an influx.
Yeah, in all these countries, Costa Rica and Belize and Mexico, there's always these conclaves of where Americans are going to live, and you just find out somehow. Today it's the internet.
Yeah,
Back then it was the back of a magazine, but you had to know which magazine it was.
right.
I mean, there was a way to find this stuff out. I'm sure it's in the biography. I'll bet you in Born on the Fourth of July, the book by Ron Kovic, it probably explains it better.
Sure, sure, sure. It's a very, very, very minor nitpick. And yes, I'm sure that there is a very clear explanation. But yeah, him there in Mexico, it's a fairly short part of the movie. Willem Dafoe, I think, is like second or third build in the movie, even though he's barely on screen. He's only in this one part of the movie. But you feel what Ron has been craving for a long time in the movie, which is this sense of community, this feeling of belonging, friendship, really. And he finds these friends there in Mexico, and that's a wonderful and important thing, except it's so fucking toxic. The friendship is based on booze and prostitutes. And hey, listen, these guys have been through hell. If they want to go to Mexico and get drunk and have sex with prostitutes, sure. You know what? They've earned it. Go for it. Have a good time. But everything is so dysfunctional. These guys are unwell. These are poor coping mechanisms. They could have real, open, honest conversations with each other about the atrocities of the war and how they're moving past them. But that is hard to do when there's so much fucking tequila involved. And what ends up happening is shouting fights, just screaming, you killed babies. No, I didn't kill babies. You must have killed babies. I killed babies. Did you kill babies? How many babies did you kill? And it's just like tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy.
I think there's camaraderie in support groups of any kind because he
Sure.
realizes he's not alone.
Right.
Every time you fire the gun into the woods, or you probably 20 years later just kind of wonder, did I kill someone? I have no idea. You probably didn't, but maybe you did. And everyone must have a different level of guilt.
Well, and Ron knows that he has killed innocent
Right. He
people,
knows it.
and specifically his fellow soldier. His name was Wilson. And so after that scene in Mexico, he goes to the Wilsons' family and he once again confesses to killing Wilson. When he did it earlier to the sergeant, he was just brushed aside. Here, he's believed. The family understands it. And his parents, I don't know if they necessarily forgive him, but they sort of say, hey, you were in hell. That kind of thing is going to happen. And then Wilson's widow specifically says that she's not going to forgive him, but that's for him to work out with God. And he doesn't get absolution, but I also don't think that Ron is expecting absolution. I think he knows that this is just something he has to do. This is the right thing to do. He wasn't able to do it before, and he's going to look these people in the face and tell them what he did. Not really for forgiveness, but just so that they know, they understand the truth, and he feels like that's the least he can do.
There's also that denial. When he's first injured, he has that scene with the doctor who's the warden from Shawshank Redemption. The doctor who is like, "You will never walk again." And Ron's like, "I will walk again." I think it was his denial phase. There was a scene where he's like, look, I'm walking around the medical ward. He's not walking at all. He's just such a strong 22-year-old. He's dragging himself by his arms,
Right.
and he's in complete denial. And then he messes himself up even more.
Yeah, the bone goes through his leg.
Yeah, an open fracture. Ow, that's horrible. The only saving grace that he couldn't feel that horrible injury.
Yeah, he heard it.
Yeah, he heard it. I think that a lot of things are denial in this film. That sergeant, the commanding officer of Ron, was denying that he murdered. He could have had some absolution. Maybe he needed to go what they called Section 8. Maybe he would have been PTSD. He needs to leave the battlefield, or maybe he just needed to tour out for a month on R&R or something. Had there not been denial there, he could have been saved that next offensive. He even talks about after he shot the first time in the ankle, he's like he was still trying to be like in those jungles in Massapequa or in the woods in Massapequa. He's still playing John Wayne, and he's later realizing, why didn't I just stay down when I was injured?
Right.
A lot of this is denial, or rather denial than acceptance. He doesn't understand why the veterans why he's not being praised in the parade, and then he understands it later.
Yes, the movie is about denial. It's also really about changing your mind. And when you think about Ron's journey from this really gung-ho, I can't wait to enlist in the Marines type of guy, to being an anti-war activist, the kind of person he was screaming at earlier in the movie, that is a journey. And what a fucking journey. Think of everything he has to go through to get there. It's not even just being injured. It's not just being shot and being paralyzed that turns him around. He is paralyzed, and he's still screaming at his hippie brother, hey, this is America, love it or leave it. It takes him a long, long time. That really resonated with me watching the movie in 2025, when we as a nation are so politically polarized. People have their opinions, and a lot of the time they are immovable. You cannot change someone's perspective. There are so many podcasts and New York Times think pieces of this person voted for Trump, and then all of Trump's policies destroyed their life. Do they regret their vote? No, not yet. I'm still waiting to see what happens. I mean, there's more of those articles than I can stomach. But I think this movie does really show you how hard it is for people to change their mind. And I like the fact that the movie does it with just slow chipping at Ron. It is not one moment where someone, maybe Donna, the Kira Sedgwick character, gives him an impassioned monologue and he realizes, oh, I was wrong this whole time. Now I'm against the war. That's not what happens. It's just little by little by little. And so at the end of the movie, when he's protesting at the Republican National Convention, when he's speaking at the Democratic National Convention, I mean, it is a complete 180 from where he started the movie, but it feels really earned. I thought that his internal change in perspective, it's slow, and, you can maybe be frustrated. Maybe his hippie brother would be frustrated. Why did it take so long? I've been screaming this at you for years. But that's how it works sometimes. People have these deeply held, ingrained beliefs, and it can be really hard to change your mind. I like the way that the movie handles all of that.
I agree. I mean, it's a good way to wrap up your feelings on it. So, Al, why don't you just tell me, do you think that Born on the Fourth of July stands the test of time today?
Yeah, I do. I think that a lot of these themes really are still relevant. The political propaganda in the 60s and 70s was more about foreign wars. That has changed. That I do not think has stood the test of time. Everyone agrees that we should not be sending American soldiers to far off lands to fight and die in other people's wars. Fingers crossed that doesn't change now with Israel and Iran. I worry, but that has shifted. However, there is still propaganda that comes from often the president saying these people are our enemy. We have to fight them. We have to get rid of them. If you don't believe what I'm saying, you're part of the problem and you are scum and you don't deserve to be in America. Now it's about immigrants, not communists in Vietnam, but it is still this othering. It is still propaganda, and it is still dangerous because people believe it, people buy into it, and it's really, really hard to get people to change their mind. Also, then there's this movie showing the anti-war protests on college campuses. In the movie, it's people protesting the Vietnam War. Nowadays, you have people protesting the Israel War. I mean, a lot of this stuff feels really fucking timely. And a lot of that is really unfortunate. There's really nothing about this movie that doesn't stand the test of time. It's really just farther in the past now, the 60s and 70s in Vietnam. I think people in 1989 remembered this stuff better than I do watching it now in 2025, but all of the themes still really resonate. One other thing about, that's kind of related to changing your mind and politics sort of in general, in the context of how the 2024 election went the way it went, it was because of men and how men voted and men went to the right. This movie, it's about all of the things it's about, the war and veterans and Vietnam. It also really is about masculinity. Like Ron talks a lot about how his penis doesn't work. He screams at his mom about his penis. There's a lot in Mexico about what these guys can and cannot do with the prostitutes because of how their dicks don't work. Honestly, I think the reason why Ron goes and talks to Wilson's family is because he feels like that is what a man should do. And so there's just a lot in here of how Ron feels as a man, how that's affected by losing the wrestling match and being rejected by Donna and everything that his parents project onto him, and then what the Marines say. It really all ties into Ron feeling like he needs to be a man. And then, kind of to your point, what you were saying, yeah, he realizes it. He realizes if he had just stayed down after he had gotten shot, he probably would have left Vietnam with a bullet in his ankle, and that would have been it. But because he had to be the big, strong man, roar, I'll kill all of you, duh, 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 duh. Then he gets hit again, and then he loses his ability to have sex. That is just a strong theme running throughout that, yeah, it stands the test of time because, again, a million fucking New York Times think pieces. What do men want? What does it mean to be a man in modern society? Men struggle to identify with this or that. These questions are still really relevant. And there are things that people are still talking about today. I wish a lot of this stuff wasn't as relevant today in 2025, but it is. And yeah, I'm going to say that the movie does stand the test of time. What do you think, James?
I think it's funny that you think that men turn to the New York Times to find out what's masculine and what's not.
Oh, I'm not saying that's where they turn. I'm saying it's the New York Times asking the questions, and we're in our fucking liberal elite bubble. We're all talking to ourselves and not reaching the people who we should be reaching. So definitely that's part of the problem, for sure.
I know you didn't mean it like that, but you're right. It is a very polarized country today, and I think it's very interesting that Ron he makes a switch, but then he also kind of thinks he's going to go, make a change in the world. However, the movie ends at the 1976 Democratic Convention, and Jimmy Carter is going to win presidency there. But we ultimately know what's going to happen, which is the 1980s and Reaganism. And someone mentions, Ron, you should run for president. I mean, could you imagine an anti-war person having won in the 80s or 90s? It never would have happened.
Sure.
I mean, Bill Clinton was he was a shoo-in for winning in 1992. His only drawback was that he was a quote unquote draft dodger. Like, people really didn't like that. I mean, he had some accusations back then, but I think people have learned that accusations don't really sink people a lot of times. But really, that draft dodger, people did not like anti-war people, and still to this day aren't crazy about it.
I mean, we elected a draft dodger twice.
No, we elected someone who claims a medical exemption from Vietnam. I mean, the knee that has had the bone spur has changed over the years, I believe. But I give Oliver Stone and Tom Cruise a lot of credit for making this film. Tom Cruise, I give credit because they do a really interesting decision about his makeup and hairdo. They give him that horrible 70s hair. He sort of looks like Lieutenant Dan when he's in his his alcoholic phase, his depressive phase in Forrest Gump. He's not that Tom Cruise heartthrob. I think that's interesting they do there. But overall, I think the film is I think it's a very interesting perspective. I don't think I've ever seen an injured soldier's journey post-war, except for Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. And unfortunately, I think Lieutenant Dan ends with him walking and being a billionaire. Basically, the most lovely ending possible. And while I like Forrest Gump, it's unrealistic about what the majority of people don't wind up investing in Apple in 1979,
right,
and getting titanium legs and walking again. And I think this film does all the ugly parts of a veteran, and also some of the beautiful parts about he lived. They talk about there's like 9 boys from Massapequa that died, and he's one of 2 that lived. He's one that's injured, but he does live, and Ron Kovic is still alive, I believe. So overall, I think the film tells an important perspective of the Vietnam War that's not talked about enough, and I do think the film stands the test of time.
Also, because this movie takes place, or a lot of it takes place in Massapequa, have you been following how Massapequa is in the news now?
No.
Also, related to modern day politics, there was a New York State law that all school districts had to change any Native American mascots, and Massapequa sued the state so that they can keep their Native American mascot, and Donald Trump weighed in, and it's this whole fucking thing that makes Long Island look terrible, quite frankly. And you know what? I'll just get on my soapbox really quick. Even if you think that the mascot isn't racist, and even if you think that Hochul shouldn't have made that law and that Massapequa should be allowed to keep their mascot, why are you fucking spending the school district's money suing the governor? Every school district in the world, even on Long Island, where we're relatively affluent, you should be spending that money on teachers and books and computers and things for the fucking kids, not suing the governor. Don't vote for the governor. You hate her? Great. Don't vote for her. Vote for someone else. That is your right. But Jesus Christ. Anyway, sorry. End of rant. I did like that the movie talks about Long Island, and it shows a burger place that's based on a real burger place on Long Island. Do you know some other famous people from Massapequa?
Jerry Seinfeld, right?
Yes, Jerry Seinfeld, absolutely. And the Baldwins. The Baldwins are all from Massapequa.
And they're all in this film. A bunch of them are in this film.
A couple of them are, yeah. A handful of them are.
A handful of the non-Alex are in this film.
Right. Yes, exactly. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to talk about Ghost, a movie celebrating its 35th anniversary. Who cares about a 35th anniversary? Even I kind of don't, but I've always wanted to see Ghost, and I've never seen it, so I'm looking forward to having a conversation about that movie next week.
Well, a 35th anniversary actually has a name. It's called the Choral Anniversary. So we're going to celebrate the choral anniversary of Ghost.
Wonderful. I love that. In the meantime, we are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Write to us. Let us know your thoughts on Born on the 4th of July, on Tom Cruise, on Ron Kovic, on Massapequa, all of the things. We love hearing from you. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.